Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to jump right in today and talk about digital security. And we'll start with a story about a tiny mistake that ended up costing a fortune.
So, picture this. It's 2017. Someone's just walking down a street in London and they find a USB stick lying on the ground. No big deal, right? Well, wrong. This thing was loaded. I'm talking 165 unencrypted files of super sensitive security info from Heathrow Airport. You know, one of the busiest airports on the planet.
And that one single lost USB stick, it led straight to this. A massive fine of £120,000 slapped on Heathrow. Why? For a colossal failure to keep its data safe.
You know, this whole crazy story just makes you wonder, doesn't it? It really brings us to the core of what we're talking about today.
How on earth could something like this have been stopped? Well, the answer comes down to one absolutely critical concept in digital safety: security controls.
Okay, so what are they really? Well, just think of them like the layers of an onion, or maybe like the different security systems in a bank vault. They're all the different safeguards an organization puts in place to protect its most valuable stuff, whether that's a building, secret info, or the computer systems that run everything.
And hey, these controls aren't just about computers. You've got physical ones, stuff like fences, locks, actual security guards. Then there are cloud controls, which are all the measures you take with a provider like Amazon or Google. But today, we're zeroing in on the big one for this story: cyber controls. These are the digital tools that protect our data and our networks.
All right, so let's get practical. What kind of cyber controls could have stopped this Heathrow mess from ever happening? Let's take a look inside the digital defense arsenal that honestly every organization should have ready to go.
Okay, first up, and this is a big one: encryption. It's basically the art of taking normal, readable data and scrambling it into complete gibberish. It's an unreadable mess to anyone who doesn't have the secret key to unscramble it.
And wow, look at this. This slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got a file name that makes perfect sense. But on the right, that's what it looks like after encryption. Just a random scramble of characters. That, right there, is the power of encryption.
And here's the kicker. This was the single biggest failure in the Heathrow incident. The files on that USB stick, they weren't encrypted at all. If they had been, that stick would have been about as useful as a rock. The data inside, totally useless and completely safe.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about our next tool in the arsenal: access controls. This one is really all about a simple, powerful idea: controlling who gets to see what.
So a huge part of access control is something called the principle of least privilege. Sounds kind of fancy, right? But it's just common sense. It means you only give people the keys to the rooms they absolutely need to be in for their job, nothing more. This move alone massively cuts down the risk of data getting into the wrong hands.
And this idea applies to logging in too. In fact, there's a really strong access control you probably use every single day. It's called multi-factor authentication, or MFA. It's really just like needing two different keys to unlock your front door.
So how does it work? It's pretty simple, actually. First, you put in something you know, that's your password. Then, you have to provide something you have, like that little code that gets texted to your phone. You need both to get in. It's a simple step, but man, it adds an incredibly strong layer of security.
But wait, there's more in the arsenal, of course. You've got your essentials. Antivirus software? That's like the immune system for your computer. Firewalls? They're the bouncers at the door, deciding who gets in and who gets kicked out. Patch management is just good hygiene. It's keeping your software updated to plug any security holes. And data backups, well, that's your safety net. It's your insurance plan for when things go wrong.
But here's the thing. You can have all the best tech in the world, and it's still only half the story. Because, the biggest weakness in any security system, it's not always the software. A lot of the time, it's us, the people.
I mean, just think back to that Heathrow mess. What caused it? It wasn't some elite team of hackers in a dark room. Nope. It was one person making a mistake. An employee lost a USB stick. And that just proves it, right? Technology gives us the tools, but the real first line of defense, that's always going to be people.
And that's exactly why one of the most powerful security controls isn't a piece of software at all. It's people, making sure everyone gets proper, continuous training on security. Simple stuff like, hey, maybe don't put super secret files on a USB stick without encrypting it. That is just absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? After everything we've talked about, what does this whole Heathrow story really mean for our own digital lives?
It really boils down to this. You can have the most expensive, high-tech, Fort Knox-level security system in the world, and one tiny, simple human mistake can bring the whole thing crashing down.
So, what should you do with this info? Because this isn't just about giant airports, it's about us, too. First, encrypt your important stuff, especially if it's on a device you carry around. Second, know the risks. Awareness is a huge part of the battle. And finally, use those tech controls like multi-factor authentication. Think of it as a safety net, because let's be honest, we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We can always update our software, right? We can patch our tech when we find a flaw. But how do you patch up person? How do you fix human error? It kind of makes you think that maybe, just maybe, the most important security control we have is locking down our own habits.
You know, when you're building a house, you don't just start throwing bricks together and hope for the best, right? Of course not. You start with a detailed blueprint. Well, building a digital defense for an organization is really no different. It needs a solid plan, a blueprint, to make sure you're protected from all angles. So today, we're going to explore what that blueprint looks like in the world of cybersecurity. So let me ask you this. Think about your own organization's security. Is it just a collection of random tools and quick fixes? You know, a new lock here, a different password policy there. Or is it a carefully constructed system built from a really solid plan? That plan, that blueprint, is what we're going to break down today. So, what do we call this blueprint? In cybersecurity, it's called a framework. It's basically a structured guide that helps an organization plan, manage, and roll out its security controls in a consistent, reliable way. It's the thing that takes the chaos of random security measures and turns it into an orderly, effective defense. Now, just like you wouldn't use the same blueprint for a small house to build a giant skyscraper, not all cybersecurity frameworks are the same. There are different types, and each one is designed for different needs. Let's dig into the three main types, because honestly, choosing the right one is absolutely critical. You can almost think of these as a progression. First up, you've got control frameworks, kind of like a starter kit for companies just getting into cybersecurity. Then, for organizations that are a bit more mature, there are program frameworks. That's the master plan. And finally, you have risk frameworks, which are all about a laser-focused strategy on managing risk. Now, while all three are super important, today we're really going to dive deep into those first two. So, who needs that starter kit? Well, control frameworks are perfect for organizations that are just starting their cybersecurity journey. If you're trying to figure out a baseline of what to do, check your basic capabilities, and create your very first security roadmap, this is exactly where you should begin. And a fantastic real-world example of a control framework comes from the Center for Internet Security, or CIS for short. It's one of the most practical and widely used blueprints out there for a reason. The real beauty of the CIS framework is its simplicity. It boils security down to 20 high-priority, really concrete defensive actions. And these aren't just abstract theories. They are specific, actionable controls designed to stop the most common attacks that organizations face every single day. The first set of controls is all about one thing: knowing what you have. I mean, you can't protect what you don't even know exists, right? This means taking inventory of all your hardware and software, hunting down that shadow IT that employees use without telling anyone, locking down user permissions, and keeping good logs. It's the absolute foundation. Okay, so building on that foundation, the next 10 controls are all about active protection. This is where you see the stuff most people think of when they hear cybersecurity. You know, malware defenses, firewalls, data encryption, and absolutely crucial things like data recovery and multi-factor authentication, or MFA. This is really the core of your defense. And this brings up a super important point. Security isn't just about technology. The final 4 controls are all organizational. They're about creating a security culture. This means training your people, having a solid plan for when things go wrong, and proactively testing your defenses with things like penetration tests. All right, so let's say you've mastered the basics with a framework like CIS. What's next? Well, for more mature organizations that want a truly comprehensive master plan, we turn to a more advanced blueprint, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. See, NIST is what we call a program framework. It's less of a simple checklist and more of a tool to build and measure the maturity of your entire security program. This is for organizations that are ready to assess their overall posture in detail and then explain it to business leaders in a way they'll actually understand. The whole NIST framework is built around these 5 core functions, and they form a continuous cycle. You identify what you need to protect, you protect it with safeguards, You put things in place to detect incidents, you have a plan to respond to them, and then you have procedures to recover your operations. Then, the cycle starts all over again, allowing you to constantly get better.
So we've looked at the starter kit and the advanced master plan. How in the world do you choose the right blueprint for your specific needs? Okay, let's pull it all together.
This chart pretty much says it all. If you're newer to security and you just need a baseline roadmap, a control framework like CIS is the perfect place to start. If you're a more mature organization looking to build out a comprehensive program and measure your progress, then a program framework like NIST is the way to go. And look, if you only take one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. There is no magic, one-size-fits-all solution. The best blueprint is the one that fits your organization's unique needs, your size, and the specific risks you face. It's a strategic choice, not just a technical one. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Take a hard look at your own organization's security. Do you have a clear, intentional blueprint that's guiding your actions, or are you just working with a pile of bricks? It's a really complex world, but getting it right is absolutely, positively critical. So let me ask you this. In a world of nonstop digital threats, how secure is your organization really? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer is anything but. We're talking about everything from these super sophisticated ransomware attacks that can shut down a hospital to a simple phishing scam that can fool even your sharpest employee. The threats are always changing, and everyone, big or small, is a target. And honestly, the sheer number of things you could worry about can feel paralyzing. I mean, where to even begin? Do you focus on the tech, on your people, on your processes? It's so easy to feel completely lost before you've even started. But, and this is the good news, there is a clear path forward. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, or NSCC, has this incredible guide that just cuts through all the noise. It's called the 10-Step Framework, and it's designed to help pretty much any organization build a really solid security plan. Okay, let's get into it. So, how are we going to tackle this? Well, we've broken down the 10 steps into these 5 themes right here. We'll start with laying the foundation, getting the basics right. Then we'll get into the human side of things and the technical defenses. We'll also talk about what to do when things go wrong, planning for a crisis. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together. All right, first things first. Before you can even think about building a fortress, you have to survey the land and make sure the main gates are locked, right? Well, that's exactly what these first 2 steps are all about. Step 1 is the risk management regime. Look, you can't protect against everything all at once. It's just not possible. So this is about figuring out your biggest, most specific risks so you can focus on the threats that matter most. Then, step 2 is secure configuration. This is about tackling the low-hanging fruit. So many breaches happen because of really simple stuff, like a database that wasn't set up right or a software update that never got installed. This step is all about closing those wide-open doors. But, a fortress is only ever as strong as the people inside guarding it. And that's why this next part is all about the human element. Technology is hugely important, but it's only half the story. Your people are a massive part of your security, so these next few steps focus directly on them. With so many of us working remotely these days, having a clear policy for home and mobile work is just not optional anymore. Then there's managing user privileges. This one is so critical and honestly so often overlooked. And finally, user education. A team that's trained to spot a sketchy email, that can be your absolute best line of defense. Let's pause on this for a second, because it's really important. This idea is sometimes called the principle of least privilege. Basically, you only give people access to the information they absolutely need to do their job and nothing more. Think about it. If one of those accounts gets compromised, the attacker's access is instantly contained. It's such a simple concept, but it has a huge impact. Okay, so we've covered the foundation and the people. Now let's talk tech. This is where we start building those digital walls, the moats, and the watchtowers that are going to protect your network. And this slide really breaks down the 2 sides of your technical defense perfectly. On one side, you've got your proactive stuff, like malware prevention and firewalls. Think of these as the big, high walls designed to just block attacks from ever getting in. But on the other side, you need active monitoring. This is your watchtower, constantly scanning for anything suspicious, trying to spot attacks as they're happening. You absolutely have to have both. And let's not forget about the physical side of digital security. USB sticks and other removable drives, they're a classic way for malware to sneak in. Just having a strict policy on how they're used, or maybe if they're even allowed at all, is a simple but really powerful control to have in place. So, you've built your defenses, you've trained your people, but what happens if an attacker actually gets through? That's where this next section comes in. Because let's be real, no system is perfect. An attack might get through eventually, and being ready for that moment is just as important as trying to stop it. This is the question, isn't it? The one that keeps security professionals up at night. You've done everything by the book, but a really clever attacker finds a tiny crack and slips through. So, what happens then? The crucial point here is this: you need a plan. Incident management is all about having clear, pre-written instructions for what to do the moment a breach happens. The goal is simple: limit the damage and get back to normal as fast as you possibly can. A good plan can mean the difference between a small headache and a total catastrophe. Okay, we've covered all the key areas now, so let's zoom out and look at how all 10 of these steps come together to form one single strategy, or as the NCSE calls it, a security regime. And here they are, all 10 steps in one place. You've got the high-level stuff like risk management, the people-focused stuff like user education, and the nitty-gritty tech like network security. You can really start to see how they all work together, creating these layers of defense that support each other. I really want to focus on this quote from the NSCSC for a second. See that word guide? That's key. This framework isn't some strict rulebook you just buy and install. It's a set of principles designed to help you build a continuous process and a culture of security that actually fits your organization. And really, that brings us to the final thought. After going through this whole framework, it's pretty clear that real cybersecurity isn't just about buying the latest software. It's about building a living, breathing process that involves your people, your tech, and your plans. So the real question is, which approach is your organization taking?
All right, today we're talking about building something absolutely essential, a solid defense against cyber threats. And the best part, we're going to use the official plans. So let's get into the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, your blueprint for security.
So let's just start with the big question, right? If you've ever worked in security, you know this feeling. Where do you even begin? It can feel completely overwhelming, like you're trying to defend against everything, everywhere, all at once. And that's a huge challenge, no matter if you're a small shop or a giant enterprise.
And this is the answer. Back in 2013, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, we just call it NIST, got together with a whole bunch of organizations, big and small, to create a solution. And what they came up with is this framework. Now, here's the most important part. This is not a strict rulebook you have to follow. It's a voluntary guide, a flexible blueprint made to help literally any business figure out its own unique risks and build a security program that actually makes sense for them, both for their budget and their needs.
So how does this whole blueprint thing actually work? Well, it all starts with something called the Framework Core. The easiest way to think about this is like it's your master catalog of all the possible security activities and best practices out there. It's the whole collection of building blocks you can use to construct your defenses.
And believe it or not, this entire super comprehensive catalog, it's all organized around just 5 key functions. That's it, just 5 core ideas that cover the entire life cycle of managing cybersecurity. So let's break them down. And here they are. It's really just a logical, continuous cycle. First, you identify what you need to protect, your systems, your assets, your data, and what risks you have. Then, you put safeguards in place to protect all that stuff. But, since nothing is 100% foolproof, you have to be able to detect when something goes wrong. And once you've detected it, you've got to respond to that incident. And finally, you need a plan to recover and get back to business. See? It's a complete loop. Now, of course, it gets more granular. Those 5 high-level functions, they get broken down into a lot more detail. We're talking 22 categories, which are sort of like groups of security goals, and then a whopping 108 subcategories, which get into specific controls. But hey, don't worry, you are not expected to memorize all of this. The framework is a reference guide, not a final exam.
So, let's look at a quick example to see how this works. We'll take that very first function, identify. The framework breaks that down into categories that are really focused on business outcomes. Things like asset management, so you know what you have, understanding your business environment, and even managing your supply chain risk. You see how it connects the technical security stuff directly to what the business actually cares about? That's the magic.
Okay, so you've got your building blocks from the core, but how well are you actually using them? That's where the second major part of the framework comes in,
the implementation tiers. You can think of this as your quality inspection. It's a way to measure how mature, how sophisticated your cybersecurity practices really are.
There are 4 tiers, and they really tell a story of an organization's journey. At Tier 1, partial, things are pretty reactive, maybe a little chaotic. But as you move up, your practices become more formalized, risk-informed, then repeatable, and finally you hit Tier 4, adaptive, where you're proactively improving based on what's happening in the world right now.
To make this super clear, let's just look at the 2 extremes. A Tier 1 organization, their security practices are informal, ad hoc, there's really not much awareness of cybersecurity risk across the company. But a Tier 4 organization, they are a learning machine. They are constantly adapting, deeply aware of the threat landscape, and using that information to get ahead of attacks before they even happen.
And this is so important to understand. The framework is not saying every single business needs to be Tier 4. For a lot of smaller companies, that would be total overkill and way too expensive. The real point of these tiers is self-awareness. It's all about helping you understand where you are right now so you can figure out where you really need to be and focus on improving those areas.
Okay, so we have the what to do from the core, and we have the how well we're doing it from the tiers. The last piece of the puzzle is the framework profile. This is where you take that generic blueprint and you create a totally custom design just for your organization.
The idea here is actually really simple. You create 2 profiles. First, you build a current profile. That's a snapshot of where your security is right now, using all those categories from the framework core. Then you create a target profile. This is your goal. This is where you want to be, based on your business needs. And that gap, the space between your current and target profiles, that becomes your roadmap. That's your action plan.
All right, let's bring all 3 of these pieces together, because that's when it gets really powerful. This isn't something you do once and then forget about. It's designed to be a continuous cycle of improvement that helps you manage and mature your security over time.
So, to wrap it all up, the core gives you the complete menu of everything you can do. That's the what. The tiers are your self-assessment tool to see how good of a job you're doing. That's the how well. And the profile takes all of that and creates your custom roadmap, showing you exactly how to get from where you are today to where you need to go. It's an incredibly powerful integrated system.
Look, the NIST framework doesn't just hand you all the answers, but it gives you the right questions and a solid structure to find them for yourself. The blueprint for building a cost-effective, risk-based security program is right here. It's free, it's available to everyone. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build with it?
So you need to choose a cybersecurity framework. It can feel like this massive, high-stakes decision, right? Pick the wrong one and it feels like you're building your whole security program on a shaky foundation. But what if I told you the goal isn't to find the perfect one at all?
You're probably looking at a sea of acronyms: NIST, CIS, NCSC, all of them offering what looks like great security advice. The pressure to pick the absolute best one is huge. But here's the secret. Making the right choice isn't really about comparing endless lists of controls. It's about a fundamental shift in how you think about them.
Exactly. The search for a single, perfect, one-size-fits-all framework, that's a trap. The real key to success isn't in the framework itself. It's in making a crucial shift in your perspective. And this quote right here, this gets to the very heart of it. You need to think of a framework, not as a rigid blueprint, but as a professional toolkit. It's got all the high-quality tools you'll ever need, but you are still the one who has to actually build the house. This brings us to our first big idea. You've got to see frameworks as tools, not as a book of rules. They provide the structure, they share best practices, but at the end of the day, you're the architect. A framework gives you the what, the essential security controls. But it's your organization's unique situation that has to dictate the how and the why. You're the one who has to connect the dots.
Let's make this more concrete with a classic example, the firewall. Pretty much every framework on the planet is going to tell you to use one. It's basic, it's foundational, kind of non-negotiable advice. But that framework isn't going to tell you the exact rule set that your business needs. As a security professional, it's your job to decide which specific ports need to be closed or what kind of traffic looks suspicious in your unique environment. This is where general advice meets your specific application. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Sometimes your specific business needs might lead you to do something that seems, completely counterintuitive, or even something that goes against a standard recommendation. Let's talk about encryption. We all think of it as a golden rule in security, right? Encrypt everything. But an organization might strategically decide not to encrypt certain internal traffic. And you might think, why on earth would they do that? Well, it could be to get a much clearer view of potential threats moving around inside their network. It's a calculated trade-off, and it's based entirely on their specific risk model.
Okay, so all of this leads to the most critical step you have to take, and you have to do it before you even start comparing frameworks. You've got to look inward. You have to know your own organization inside and out. So before you even download a single framework document, you need to ask some hard questions internally. First, what are our absolute must-have business priorities? What can't fail? Next, where is the company going in the next 5 years? Your security plan has to help that growth, not block it. And finally, you have to be really honest. What is our actual appetite for risk? Answering these questions creates the lens that you'll use to evaluate every single option. All right, once you have that internal clarity, then you can move on to choosing your starting point. This is all about matching the right type of framework to your organization's current level of security maturity. This slide really breaks down the two main flavors of frameworks. So on the left, you've got control frameworks like SIS. Think of these as your getting started guide. They're a prioritized checklist that helps you build your security program from scratch. Then on the right, you have program frameworks like the famous NIST-CSF. These are really for more mature organizations. They're less of a checklist and more of a strategic way to manage risk across the entire business and explain it to everybody, including the C-suite. So if your team is just starting out on this journey, a control framework is absolutely your best friend. It just cuts through all the noise and gives you a clear, prioritized roadmap so you can tackle the most important stuff first without getting totally overwhelmed. But if you've already mastered the basics, a program framework is how you level up. It helps you shift the conversation from, are we implementing this control, to how does this control reduce our business risk? It's all about building a holistic system that bakes security into every single part of the organization's operations. And this brings us full circle, right back to the most important takeaway here. The value isn't in just adopting a framework, it's in adapting it. You're not just checking off boxes on a list, you are building a security system that is uniquely yours. So the final question I want you to ask yourself is this. When you look at your cybersecurity framework, do you see a rigid set of rules that you absolutely have to follow? Or do you see a flexible roadmap that's there to guide you toward a more secure future? The difference in that perspective, well, it's everything.